Hello, I'm Glenn Tomsett, and welcome along to a new show here on Connections Radio called Autumna. Now, Autumna is all about later life care options, and we hope you get some valuable information and advice from this series of programmes. And to help us understand more about Autumna, I'm joined by Debbie Harris. Debbie is a founder of Autumna. Welcome, Debbie. Nice to have you back in the studio again. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, thanks, Glenn.
Nice to have you on board. For anyone who's joined us for the first time and maybe didn't hear our very first episode, just quickly tell us about Autumna and what you do there, Debbie.
Yeah, sure. So Autumna is an online directory supporting families who are looking for later life care. So that's care homes, home care, living care, or assisted living, sort of retirement housing. We also operate a 7-day-a-week advice line, so it doesn't matter how you want to find out about care or talk about care, we can help you.
Okay, well, today we're going to be chatting about hospital discharge and rights of patients. And to do this, we're also joined by Heidi Sherman. Heidi is a private client executive at Parfitt Cresswell Solicitors. Heidi, nice to have you on the show today. What does your job entail? And hello, welcome.
Hello, Glenn. Yes, that's right. I'm in the private client department at the Sutton office of Parfitt Cresswell Solicitors, and we have a large team that helps with all private client types of work, so wills, powers of attorney, trusts and probate, and we also specialise in managing affairs of people who lack mental capacity and wish to appoint our trust corporation to help them. So
fair to say you're very busy at the moment, I guess.
Yeah, always very busy, but always very rewarding as well.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's get into the nitty-gritty of today's programme then. Hospital discharge, Debbie. It's something we've heard a lot about in the news, isn't it? Especially over the last couple of years. For anybody who doesn't really understand what hospital discharge is, perhaps you could explain for us.
I'm going to sort of focus on the older patient, and that's, say, somebody from about 60 plus. It doesn't sound old from where I'm sitting, but let's just say 60 plus. And this is where you've gone into hospital for whatever reason, and you no longer need a hospital bed. You're medically fit for discharge. And this is where the hospital organises any ongoing care package that you might need. So this could be home care or a care home or just a temporary package of care to support you to leave the hospital. So it's the process around leaving hospital.
Okay, and what happens when a patient is discharged from hospital then?
The question is what normally happens, and the problem is what normally happens varies from hospital to hospital. It varies on the care requirements of the individual, and it actually, over the last 2 years, has varied depending upon the COVID status of the country. So it really is a very individual problem faced by individual families.
And it's quite a process, isn't it? I mean, obviously hospitals need to free up beds as quickly as possible. We've seen all the pictures on the television news of people, rammed and crammed into corridors and into hallways, and even sitting in ambulances. The trick here is for the hospital is to free up as many beds as quickly as they can.
They call it patient flow through the hospital. So if you've got somebody sitting in a hospital bed who is medically fit for discharge and they can't find, for example, a care home for that person to go to, then what happens is they stay sitting in the hospital bed until they can find the care. Now, if you've got somebody sitting in a hospital bed, the person who is waiting for that bed in A&E can't move out of A&E. And the person who is in the ambulance sitting outside the hospital who is waiting to get into A&E can't get into A&E. And the person who is at home waiting for the ambulance doesn't get the ambulance because it's sitting outside A&E. So for every person that sits in a hospital bed waiting to find their care, 4 people, in fact, are affected. And we're hearing a lot about people who are waiting for operations. Well, you can't go into hospital for an operation unless there is a bed for you. So it also affects that whole cohort as well.
All right, well, thanks for that, Debbie. Let's bring Heidi in, and Heidi Sherman from Parfitt Cresswell Solicitors. Heidi, as we established, is a private client executive. Heidi, what do people need to have in place before being discharged? It's quite a lot of thought process going into this, isn't it, for all members of the family?
Yes, that's right. And as Debbie said, a patient needs to be considered medically fit to be able to leave the hospital. And for that decision to have been made, there needs to have been certain assessments having taken place. And usually this will involve a best interest meeting, which is multidisciplinary. So the consultant in charge might be at that meeting, relatives might be at that meeting, there might be someone from physiotherapy or other services, and someone from social services might also be involved, so that the right care placements can be set up before the person can leave hospital.
Debbie, you'd think, leaving a hospital after whatever treatment has been involved would be a fairly straightforward process, a matter of just sort of jumping in the car and going home. But that's not the case, is it? That isn't always the case.
No, it's not. The majority of delays for hospital discharge is lack of being able to identify appropriate care provision. So the last statistics I saw for later life patients were 40% of the hospital discharges required home care. Now, as we know, we're seeing in the paper all the time, there is a real shortage of home care staff. So it's a case of identifying a provider that can support you in your location and has the staff available. About 4% of the discharges go to care homes. And again, it's a case of identifying the care home that has immediate availability and can support the care needs of that patient. So it's really about communicating really effectively with social care and ensuring that the needs of the patient are being met by the providers that you're contacting to see whether or not they can provide the care. But in addition to that, when you have found the care, you then might have delays for getting medication together. And unfortunately, in a lot of instances, you can't just jump in the car. You might need specialist transport to get you to where you're going. So there are transport delays as well. So there's so many different elements that need to be pulled together in order to get an effective and a speedy discharge from the hospital. It's no wonder there are people sitting in a hospital bed that shouldn't necessarily be there.
And does the process become messy? When I say messy, do you need to then call on people like Heidi, a solicitor, to get involved in the process?
Well, I think that's a really interesting point, because one of the things that we see often is that the family or the patient themselves don't feel they have any autonomy in the decisions that are being made on their behalf. And this is particularly relevant if you are self-funding any ongoing care. So if you're paying for the care yourself when you leave hospital, the patients and families seem to be just following what they're told to do without really realising there is autonomy. And so one of the questions I would ask Heidi is, how much control does the family have if they don't want to go to a particular care home, if they don't want mum to go to the care home that's suggested? Are they within their rights to just say, no, we're not going there, we're paying for this, we're going to go to this care home?
I would say if the patient has mental capacity, they can absolutely say no to a particular care home if they don't want it and they're paying for it. They should have much more choice over which care home they go to. The problem is when a patient is in hospital, they haven't been very well, they might be nervous about moving to a care home, and it can all get a bit overwhelming. And I think there probably are a large number of people that end up just doing what they've been told, unfortunately.
And the rights of the patient, have to be respected, don't they, at the end of the day?
They do, that's right. And I think, particularly where they're paying for it, they're paying very high fees privately for a care home, and it's only fair that they should be able to choose which one they're going to be living in, for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I agree with Heidi, totally. What we're also seeing, though, as a result of COVID, is we're seeing patients being discharged from hospital on a discharge to assess. So there is no assessment or limited assessment taking place in hospital. They're being discharged to a care home or a community hospital where they're then going to be assessed for a financial assessment and also a needs assessment. So we're seeing patients going out of hospital into a discharge to assess bed for up to 6 weeks. And I actually spoke to somebody the other day who'd been there 5 months, paid for by the NHS, so costing a fortune, and just waiting for these 2 assessments to take place before they can go on to a more appropriate care home.
Why is this such a lengthy process? Is it just the sheer number of people involved and trying to get through the system?
Do you know what, Glenn? I wish I knew why it was so difficult, because we support thousands of people a month who are going through a very similar process. They have to identify what their funding is, identify what their care needs are, and identify an appropriate care placement. And we do this, a few of us do this for thousands of people every month. I cannot understand why it is proving so challenging for the discharge teams and the brokerage teams coming out of hospital, especially when speed is of the essence. I wonder actually if it's just down they don't have the resources to be able to contact all of the providers that they need to.
So this is where Autumna can offer invaluable advice, I guess. This is something you deal with on a day-to-day basis, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. We estimate about 10% of the people we support are currently sitting in a hospital bed, or they are we're supporting the family and the relative is sitting in a hospital bed. And we make it really clear that, not only do you want to free up the bed as far as the NHS is concerned for the 3 people waiting behind you to get into that bed, but also it's in the best interests of your relative, because the longer you stay in hospital, frankly, the higher risk you've got of catching flu or COVID or something else, but also you're not moving around enough. So you're losing muscle mass, which is really important if you're older, that you don't do that. And with the best will in the world, the hospital food isn't brilliant. So I think there's many reasons and benefits of getting out of hospital as quickly as you can.
Heidi, coming back to you, the importance of an LPA then in this situation, and again, this is where the legal side, yourself, Parfitt Cresswell, can help, can't you?
That's right. So the relevant lasting power of attorney that someone would need to be able to deal with healthcare issues would be the health and welfare document. And the way that document works is that it only comes into effect for the attorneys to act when the patient themselves lacks mental capacity. So if the patient has mental capacity, they are considered able and with authority to make their own decisions about care and where they would want to live and their day-to-day healthcare wishes. But if they lack mental capacity, their attorneys can speak for them as if they are them. So they can say, I don't want that care home for my mother. I know she wouldn't like it. And I've looked at one that's just down the road. It's a lovely environment and they've got a place for her. And that will help, because that also helps the hospital know that there is a place available. They haven't got to make all the phone calls, and it just speeds things up all round if you've got someone that can make those kind of calls for you.
Debbie, it's an incredibly emotional time, isn't it? The addition of having been in hospital and the emotion involved with that. It doesn't end when you leave hospital, does it, for a lot of people? There's so much emotion involved. The legal side apart, there's a lot of turmoil involved, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. And when you think about it, really, you've perhaps been a little bit worried about mum being unsteady on her feet. She then has a fall. She then ends up in hospital, and they then tell you that, do you know what, she's not safe to go back home and she needs to go into a care home. That's a relatively typical progression of events. So you're feeling guilty, you're feeling emotional, you're feeling very lost, because most people, particularly when you're looking for a care home, have just never considered how you would go about doing that before. It's the first time you've ever done it. And of course, there's all of the financial commitment as well if they're self-funding. But I do think if you feel like you're in control a little bit, if you feel you have some autonomy and that you're doing things on behalf of your mum and that they're the right things, and whether your mum's able to input or not, you know what she would want, what she would like. It's that level of autonomy that I think is really missing in families who are working with the hospital discharge team or being told what to do by the hospital discharge team, and so they just feel everything's out of their control and out of their hands. So if nothing else as a result of today, if somebody thinks, well, actually I am able to be in control, I'm legally able to, and I know what's right for my mum, then I think we've won today, even if just one person realises that.
Heidi, can the hospital actually stop anybody from leaving hospital? Do they have the power to do that?
Well, if a person has mental capacity and they are medically fit to leave, there is no reason why they can't leave hospital. They don't have to accept medical treatment or the suggested care arrangements for them. However, if the hospital believes that there is a necessity to act and look after them, doctors can step in if there is a medical problem, and social services may also get involved if they think there's a safeguarding concern and that person does just say in the middle of the night, I'm going home now and I haven't got any care in place, but I've had enough here. They can go home, but they will have social services knocking on their door to check up on them.
For a lot of families, Debbie, knowing where to turn is so important, isn't it? Because that person is leaving the hospital, not sure whether the mum or dad or uncle or auntie or whoever should go into a care home. Do they need full-time care? A lot of folks just maybe scratching their heads and thinking, well, I don't know where to turn. What do I do? What do you advise?
I think you've got to do your research. You've got to get online. That's where all of the information is. I mean, you can go on Autumna. There are other directories, but you can go on Autumna and you can look at every registered care provider in the UK so that you can search for the different services. But I think just going back to your slightly earlier point is when you don't know whether or not somebody is going to need long-term care or whether or not they just need a short period of care to get them back on their feet, something that often doesn't happen if you're still in hospital. The rehabilitation, if you like. You can go into a care home for a respite stay or a rehabilitation stay. So you could go in for a month with the full view that you're going to go back home again once you're back on your feet. So once you understand the different options available to you, and I guess that's the reason you need to speak to somebody. We've got an advice line. It's 7 days a week. Give us a call if you're unsure. But it is understanding the options that are available to you and feeling that you've got control to act upon those options.
It is a bit of a minefield, isn't it, I guess?
It really is. And one of the things that I personally find really worrying is the length of time it can sometimes take to get somebody out of hospital once they've been medically fit for discharge.
Well, you mentioned earlier 5 months. That was incredible, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, that was in a discharge to assess bed. So They'd left the hospital bed and they'd been put in a care home waiting to be assessed. I won't go into that. It was a horrendous situation. But we actually did some research I mentioned 10% of our clients are actually sitting in a hospital bed that we support. And we did some research on how long they had been looking after they'd been told they were medically fit to leave, how long they'd been looking for care before they came to us. And I'm really sad to say the average length of time was 31 days.
Wow, 31 days.
Now, when you think it costs £400 a day for somebody to be sitting in a hospital bed and they didn't need it, and it was blocking 3 other people.
That's amazing.
Really worrying.
Yeah, it is worrying, isn't it? If anybody wants details about how you can help, the website's autumna.co.uk, autumna.co.uk. So, Debbie, at what point in this process of hospital discharge, then, would you typically step in?
Well, it varies, actually. So we are often contacted by the family who is looking on behalf of mum, who is in hospital, and they come to us and they explain mum's in hospital, she's ready to leave, but she needs home care or she needs a care home. So it can be the family that makes contact with us. But as I've already said, that can be after a month of already waiting for the hospital to discharge them. But we are increasingly also being contacted by social workers, prescribers, brokerage teams, hospital discharge teams, because they've realised we've got a very simple system where they can put the anonymised patient's details into a simple online search service, and we will ask those providers if they have availability, which of course is critical, and they can meet that patient's needs to then contact the social worker directly. So it's really saving a lot of time for the social workers, and we're working with more and more of them.
So, fascinating conversation then. I mean, we could talk for a long, long time on this particular subject of hospital discharge and, of course, patients' rights. If anybody wants any legal advice, Heidi, from yourself and the organisation, of course, Parfitt Cresswell, you work for, what's their best route to you?
The best route is probably to start via our website, which is www.parfittcresswell.com, and that gives details of our various offices so that somebody can contact their local office, the nearest one to them, and arrange an appointment if they want to go in person, or they can give us a call and arrange the most suitable person to speak to over the telephone. And we're always happy to have an initial chat if someone is experiencing problems, and it doesn't have to be a formal arrangement. They can just ring up and have a little chat with somebody to find out what their rights are.
All right. And Debbie, from you, if anybody wants help finding a care home, what's their best route?
Well, like Heidi, they can go on the website, which is Autumna, that's autumn with an A on the end, .co.uk, or you can call us. We're open 7 days a week. It's a free advice line, and it's 01892 335 330. Or you can email us at info@autumna.co.uk, and Autumna is spelt autumn with an A on the end.
Okay, lovely stuff. Well, listen, thanks very much for joining us today on the programme. Of course, Debbie Harris, who is behind Autumna. She, of course, is the founder of Autumna, and also Heidi Sherman. Heidi is a private client executive at Parfitt Cresswell Solicitors. Thank you both for joining us today on the programme.